The chow hall at the Norfolk Naval Base was always loud at noon. It was a big, bright room full of the sounds of metal trays, talking, and chairs scraping on the floor. The air smelled like grease, coffee, and cleaning spray. Sailors and Marines in the same tan digital camo filled the room, a sea of people taking a break from their morning duties. Sergeant Mark Riggins moved through the crowd with his tray. He was a Marine, built solid and strong from years of training. But today, his mind was somewhere else. He was still angry about a piece of paper on his commander's desk, a fitness report that said he needed to work on his attitude. The words "poor leadership temperament" were stuck in his head, burning. He felt the injustice of it. He saw guys who talked better get promoted, while he, who just got the job done, got criticized. He was almost to the drinks when he stopped. Someone was standing at the small station where they kept the ketchup, mustard, and napkins. It was a sailor, and she was blocking the whole thing. She wasn't big. In fact, she looked small in her uniform, almost like it was a bit too much for her. She had her back to him, taking her sweet time squeezing ketchup onto a pile of fries on her tray. A hot wave of irritation washed over Riggins. It was the last straw on a very bad day. Here he was, a sergeant with real responsibilities, and he was being held up by some junior sailor who probably spent her days typing at a desk. "Hey," he said, his voice rough. "Move it along, sweetheart. Some of us have actual work to get back to." The woman didn't jump. She didn't even turn around right away. She finished her last, slow squeeze of the ketchup bottle. Then she placed it neatly back in the rack. Only then did she half turn her head, just enough to glance at him over her shoulder. Her eyes were a cool, calm gray. She looked at his face, then down at the name tape on his chest that said Riggins, and then back to his eyes. She didn't say a word. She just turned back around and reached for a napkin, wiping a tiny spot of ketchup from her finger. That did it. That silent dismissal, like he was nothing, like he was air. The anger from the fitness report and the frustration of the crowded day all boiled over. He didn't think. His body acted before his brain could catch up. With a grunt of pure annoyance, he shoved forward, not with his fist, but with a heavy plastic tray in his hand. The edge of it dug into her shoulder, pushing her off balance dot as she stumbled a step to the side. The words came out of his mouth, low and mean. "Die, bitch." The sounds of the mess hall seemed to fade for a moment around them. A few people at nearby tables looked up, their conversations pausing. The woman, Lieutenant Alex Vance, caught her balance instantly. It wasn't a clumsy trip. It was more like her body knew how to fall and recover without thinking. One foot planted firmly, and she was straight again. She turned to face him fully now. There was no shock on her face. No fear, no anger. Her expression was completely flat, like a calm lake. She looked at him again, and this time her gaze felt heavy, like it was taking in every detail about him and filing it away. The silence stretched for 2, 3, 4 seconds. Then she spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the background noise. She didn't yell. She simply said his name, his rank, like she was reading it from a list. Sergeant Riggins. That was all. No threat, no argument. She didn't look at her spilled fries or the tray. She just looked at him for one more second with those cool gray eyes, turned, and walked away. She left her full tray right there on the counter and walked out of the mess hall. Not hurrying, just moving with a smooth, easy pace until she was gone through the double doors. Riggins stood there, his heart still pounding from the rush of the fight. The people who had been watching slowly went back to their food, the moment passing. He let out a tense breath, feeling a twisted sense of victory. He showed her. He showed everyone. He wasn't someone to be ignored. He grabbed his drink, not even needing the ketchup anymore, and walked to his table where a few other Marines from his unit were sitting. "Everything all right, Sarge?" one of them asked. Riggins sat down, a smirk finally touching his lips. "Yeah," he said, picking up his fork. "Just had to remind a Pogue about the chain of command. No big deal." He started eating, the taste of the food mixing with the bitter taste of his earlier anger. He pushed the incident out of his mind. It was over. He'd won. He had no idea that the quiet woman in the uniform was not a clerk, not a typist, not a Pogue at all. He had just put his hands on and threatened a ghost, and ghosts have a way of making their presence known. The walk back from the mess hall was quiet for Alex Vance. The bright sun outside felt different than the fluorescent lights inside. She didn't feel anger as she walked. She felt a kind of cold, clear focus, like when you're getting ready for a mission and every detail needs to be just right. Her mind wasn't on the shove or the words. It was on the sequence, the cause, the action, the result. She replayed it in her head like a security tape. Asterisk sergeant, shove with tray. Threatening language. Asterisk, it was a simple, stupid thing. But in her world, simple, stupid things could get people killed. They revealed character. She didn't go to the regular office buildings. She walked past them, towards a part of the base that didn't have many signs. The buildings here were older, made of plain brick. She stopped at one that looked like it might hold supplies. She tapped a code into a keypad by a side door. It buzzed softly and let her in. Inside, it wasn't fancy. It was all concrete floors, and the smell of old coffee and gun oil. This was the unofficial home of her unit. On paper, they didn't really exist. They were the Integrated Support and Reconnaissance Unit, or ISRU. Every person in it, man or woman, had passed a special kind of hell. It wasn't the full SEAL Bud S course, but it was its own brutal cousin designed to find people who could think, adapt, and survive in shadows, supporting the very tip of the spear. They were intelligence gatherers, communications experts, and specialists who could operate in places regular sailors couldn't. Her boss, a man they all called Senior Chief, looked up from a desk covered in maps. He was probably in his 50s, with a face that looked like worn leather and calm eyes that missed nothing. He took one look at her and put his coffee down. "Lieutenant, you're back early. Chow that bad?" Vance stood at a sort of relaxed attention. "Sir, an incident occurred in the mess hall." She told him. She didn't use any emotion. She just gave the facts the same way she'd report a broken piece of gear or a change in a target's schedule. Marine Sergeant named Riggins. He initiated unwanted physical contact, used his tray as an instrument to shove me. Following the physical contact, he issued a direct verbal threat. "Die, bitch." I disengaged and returned here. Senior Chief listened without moving. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. The squeak of the chair was the only sound for a moment. "He touched you," Senior Chief said, not as a question, but as a statement of the core problem. "Yes, Senior Chief." And he made a threat. "In front of witnesses." "Yes, Senior Chief." Senior Chief nodded slowly. This wasn't about hurt feelings. This was about security, about discipline, and about the invisible line that protected his people. A person who would do that in a crowded mess hall was unstable. An unstable person who knew the face of one of his operators was a potential risk. A threat needed to be assessed and neutralized, one way or another. "All right," he said, his voice low. "Write it up, every detail. Then get some actual food. I'll make some calls." Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk across the base. Sergeant Riggins' afternoon went on like normal. He did his afternoon patrol with his unit, checking the perimeter fences. He felt okay, even good. The little moment in the mess hall felt like blowing off steam. He told the story again to a couple of the guys during a break, leaving out the exact words he used, but making it clear he'd put some snobby sailor in her place. Probably some admiral's assistant. One of his friends laughed. Good for you, Sarge. But then, slowly, the air began to change. It started when he got back to the company office. His direct boss, a staff sergeant, called him in. The man's face was serious. Riggins? The battalion commander's office just called. They want your service jacket and your recent fitness reports. Everything. Now. Riggins felt a first small knot form in his stomach. My jacket? Why, Staff Sergeant? I don't know, the staff sergeant said, looking at him with a searching eye. But they didn't sound happy. What did you do? Nothing, Staff. Sergeant, Riggins said, but his voice didn't sound as sure as it had before. Later, as he was cleaning his rifle, the company first sergeant found him. The first sergeant was a big, quiet man who had seen everything. Riggins, a word. They stepped outside. The first sergeant looked out at the yard, not at him. There's an inquiry, he said simply. It's coming from outside the Marine chain of command. It's coming from the Navy, and it's got some serious weight behind it. It's about an altercation. Today, in the mess hall. The knot in Riggins' stomach tightened. He tried to shrug. It was nothing, First Sergeant. Just a little disagreement. She was in the way. The first sergeant finally looked at him. His eyes were hard. I don't know who that sailor was, Riggins, but she wasn't just anything. This kind of heat doesn't come down for a little disagreement. You need to get your story straight. And you need a better story than she was in the way. That night, lying in his bunk, the confidence was gone. The quiet way she had said his name echoed in his head. Sergeant Riggins. It hadn't been a plea or a curse. It had sounded like a notation, like she was marking him down in a book. He thought about the cold look in her eyes. Not fear, not anger. It was a look he'd seen before, but he couldn't place it. It was the look of a professional assessing a problem. The kind of look a sniper might have before adjusting his scope. For the first time, a sliver of doubt cut through him. Who was that woman? And what had he actually started when he pushed her with that tray? He fell into a restless sleep, unaware. That in a plain brick building, his entire service record was being read under a single lamp by a senior chief whose only goal was to protect his own. The machinery had begun to turn, and Sergeant Riggins was now caught in its gears. The next week was a strange kind of torture for Sergeant Riggins. It wasn't the loud, shouting kind he was used to from boot camp. This was quiet, and that made it worse. First, they pulled him from his regular duties. No more patrols with his unit. Instead, he was given busy work organizing supply rooms that were already organized, painting curbs that didn't need painting. It was a way of isolating him, of telling him he was on the outside now. His friends didn't know what to say to him, so they mostly just stopped talking to him. Then came the official meeting. He was told to report to the JAG office, the military lawyers. He put on his best uniform, his hands sweating as he walked into the clean, quiet building. It smelled like carpet and paper, not sweat and oil like his world. He sat in a small room across from a Navy lawyer, a commander with sharp eyes and a calm voice. The commander didn't yell. He just laid out the facts, one by one, like stacking bricks. Sergeant Riggins, we have statements from 7 witnesses in the mess hall. All confirm you initiated physical contact with Lieutenant Vance. Several heard the language you used. This constitutes assault and conduct unbecoming. The lieutenant has declined to press charges personally, but the Navy has an interest in this case. Riggins tried to explain. Sir, it was just a moment of frustration. She was disrespecting. She is a commissioned officer. Sergeant, the commander interrupted, his voice still quiet, but now like a steel cable. You laid hands on her? You threatened her? In the eyes of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, this is very clear. The commander slid a piece of paper across the table. It outlined the potential consequences of a court-martial: reduction in rank, forfeiture of pay, possibly even a dishonorable discharge and jail time. Riggins felt the room get smaller. His career, everything he had worked for, was on that piece of paper, about to be shredded. However, the commander said, leaning back, given the unique circumstances and the lieutenant's unit's particular viewpoint, an alternative is being offered. He explained it. It wasn't standard Navy punishment. It was something else. Riggins would voluntarily submit to a week of corrective training. It would be administered by personnel from Lieutenant Vance's unit. It would be physically and mentally demanding. If he completed it to their satisfaction, the court-martial would be off the table. A formal letter of reprimand would be placed in his file. But he could remain a Marine. If you fail to complete it, or if you violate any terms, the commander said, we proceed immediately with the court-martial. Do you understand? Riggins's mind was racing. Corrective training? With her unit? He pictured a bunch of office workers in PT gear, maybe making him do push-ups. It would be embarrassing, sure. But he was a Marine. He could do push-ups in his sleep. He could outrun, outlift, and outsuffer any sailor in a support unit. This was his way out. A week of humiliation to save his career. I understand, sir, Riggins said, a flicker of his old confidence returning. I accept the alternative. The commander looked at him for a long moment, as if he wanted to say something else, but just nodded. Report to Building G14 at 05:00 tomorrow. Bring your gear for the field. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The next morning, in the dark and cold, Riggins stood outside Building G14. It was another one of those plain, forgotten buildings on the edge of the base. He had his backpack, his canteens, ready for whatever this was. He thought he was prepared. At exactly 05:00, the side door opened. Lieutenant Vance stepped out. She wasn't in the regular digital camo. She wore a plain green tactical uniform with no patches, no name, no rank. It was worn and faded. Behind her were two others, a man and a woman dressed the same. They all had the same look, not big, but lean, with a quiet stillness about them. Their eyes didn't scan around nervously. They just settled on him, taking him in. Sergeant Riggins, Vance said. Her voice was neutral, like a doctor reading a chart. You will follow us. You will speak only to answer a direct question. You will maintain a distance of 5 paces. Do you understand? Yes, Riggins said. Your first answer is incorrect. The proper response is, yes, Lieutenant. Riggins clenched his jaw. Yes, Lieutenant. Follow. They didn't go into the building. They turned and started moving across the darkened field behind it at a brisk, steady jog. Riggins shouldered his pack and followed, easily keeping the 5-pace distance. Asterisk, this is it? He thought. Asterisk, morning run? I can do this all day. Asterisk, they ran for 45 minutes, not on paved roads, but across rough, uneven grass and dirt. The pace wasn't a sprint, but it was constant and unrelenting. The 3 figures in front of him moved with an efficiency that was almost mechanical, their breathing steady. Riggins was fit, but he was used to running in boots with his unit, talking, breaking the rhythm. This silent, steady pressure was different. As the sky began to lighten, they arrived at a training compound he'd never seen before. It wasn't the official obstacle course. It was a collection of strange, makeshift structures. Walls of cargo netting, odd wooden towers, ropes strung over muddy pits. Vance and her 2 teammates stopped. They weren't even breathing hard. Sergeant, Vance said, pointing to a rope stretched over a 30-foot wide pit of muddy water. You will cross using the rope. Feet on the rope, Hands above you on the guide wire. Go. Riggins looked at it. He was strong. How hard could it be? He grabbed the guide wire, put his feet on the thick rope, and started to shuffle across. Immediately, the rope began to swing wildly. His arms, bearing all his weight, started to burn. He fought for balance, lurching and slipping. Halfway across, his foot slipped off. He hung by his hands for a desperate second before dropping into the cold, chest-deep muddy water. With a huge splash dot, he came up sputtering. The three on the bank watched him. No one laughed. No one smiled. Their faces showed nothing. "Your technique is inefficient," the male operator said, his tone flat. "You rely on upper body strength. You fight the rope instead of working with it." Vance pointed. Again. Shivering and now covered in mud, Riggins hauled himself out and tried again. And again. He fell 3 more times. Each time he was met with the same blank stares and the single word, again. By the time they let him move on, his hands were raw, his muscles trembling from the strange, specific exhaustion. This wasn't about being strong. It was about being smart, balanced, and in control of your body in a way he had never been trained for. The morning went on like that. They didn't yell. They just presented him with tasks, a maze of tunnels too small to crawl through comfortably. A wall you had to climb using only friction on 2 boards, and when he failed, which was often, they gave him a short, technical explanation of why he failed, and told him to do it again. His initial confidence, the idea that this was just a tough gym class, evaporated completely. He was being dismantled, not by brute force, but by simple, relentless competence. These people weren't just fit. They were capable in a way that felt alien to him. And standing in the center of it all, clean and dry, was Lieutenant Vance, watching his struggle with those calm gray eyes, silently showing him exactly what he had mistaken for weakness in the mess hall. The lesson was just beginning, and he was starting to understand how deep it would go. The days began to blur together for Riggins. He would wake in the dark, his body aching in new and specific ways. The training wasn't about getting tired in a general sense. It was about finding every single weak spot he had, every place where he relied on force instead of technique, and hammering on it. One morning, they sat him at a table under a tent. In front of him was a disassembled pistol, its pieces laid out on a cloth. The female operator, who he had learned was called Chief, sat across from him with her own pistol. "Clear it, show clear, and reassemble," she said. "Time starts now." Riggins was a Marine. He knew his rifle inside and out. But this was a different weapon system. He fumbled with the slide, dropping a spring. His fingers felt thick and stupid. He got it back together in a clumsy minute. Chief didn't say a word. She simply picked up her own pistol. Without even looking down, her hands became a smooth, quiet machine. In less than 15 seconds, the weapon was taken apart, the pieces shown, and clicked back together into a single deadly unit. The snick-snick of the parts fitting was the only sound. She did it again, slowly, so he could see. It wasn't about speed, she explained. It was about knowing the tools so well that your hands could do it in the dark, underwater, under stress. It was about trust. Another day, they focused on movement. They were in a fake town made of shipping containers. The male operator, Tex, showed him how to walk. It sounded ridiculous to Riggins. He knew how to walk. But Tex showed him how to move from the corner of a building to a doorway without presenting a silhouette. How to keep his weapon from banging against something. How to shift his weight so his footsteps were absorbed by the ground, not announced by it. Riggins tried, feeling like a giant, clumsy child. Every scrape of his boot, every rustle of his uniform, sounded like thunder to his own ears now. Lieutenant Vance was always there, She rarely led the instruction. She observed. Sometimes she would step in with a single quiet correction. "You're holding your breath," she'd say when he was trying to be still. Or, "You're looking at your hands. Your hands know what to do. Watch the door." Her voice was always calm, always precise. There was no anger in it, no gloating. It was the voice of a professional fixing a problem with a piece of equipment. He was the piece of equipment. The old burning anger he had carried from the mess hall was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, sinking feeling. It wasn't just that these people were better than him at obscure skills. It was the why. Every single thing they did had a purpose. Every smooth motion, every second saved, was about survival and completing a mission. The sheer depth of their focus made his own world of fitness reports and barracks gossip feel small and childish. On the fourth day, they came to what they called the house. It was a concrete building with a few rooms and a hallway. The light inside was dim. Riggins was given a weapon that fired marking cartridges paint rounds. It felt real. Tex explained the drill. "You are the threat. You wait in the last room. We are coming in to clear the building. Your job is to stop us." A grim determination settled over Riggins. Finally, something that felt like a fight. Something he could understand. He took his position in a back bedroom, his back against a wall next to the door, his weapon up. He could hear his own heart. He would show them. He'd get at least one of them. He listened for the sound of boots, for the bang of a door. He heard nothing. Then, a shadow blotted out the thin light under the door. It was there and then gone. He tightened his grip, finger near the trigger, staring at the doorknob. It didn't turn. A soft thump came from the wall to his left. He glanced at it, confused. It was a solid concrete wall. Suddenly, the entire door seemed to explode inward. But it wasn't a kick. It was a body, moving so fast it was a blur, already low and inside the room before the door had even finished swinging. It wasn't Tex or Chief Dot. It was Lieutenant Vance. She didn't come in looking for him. She came in already knowing exactly where he was. As he tried to swing his weapon around, she was already on him. Not with a flying kick or a punch, but with simple, devastating efficiency. One hand deflected his weapon barrel upwards as she moved past his shoulder. At the same time, her other arm came across his throat, not to choke, but to control, to pull him off balance. His own momentum, his own weight, was used against him. He stumbled forward, and she swept his legs out from under him. He hit the concrete floor hard, the breath knocked out of him. Before he could even grunt, he felt the cold, hard press of a pistol barrel against the back of his neck. He hadn't even heard her draw it. "Threat neutralized," her voice said. Flat and quiet in his ear, the whole thing, from the door, moving to the gun at his neck, had taken less than 3 seconds. The lights came on. Riggins lay on the floor, gasping, a bright blue paint mark staining his shoulder where her training round had hit him at some point. He didn't even remember. Vance was already standing a few feet away, holstering her pistol. She wasn't breathing hard. She looked at him the same way she had in the mess hall. Tex and Chief walked in. "You set up in the classic ambush spot," Tex said, not unkindly. "Predictable. You focused on the door. You heard a distraction and took your eyes off your field of fire for 0.8 seconds. That's all she needed." Riggins pushed himself up to his knees, his body hurting, his pride in ashes. He looked up at Vance. The understanding crashed down on him finally, completely. The shove in the mess hall. It wasn't that she couldn't have reacted. It was that she had chosen not to. In that crowded room, she had assessed him, the situation, and the consequences in a split second, and had chosen the most tactically sound option: disengage and report. She had shown more discipline and control in that moment than he had shown in his entire career. He wasn't just dealing with sailors who were a little tougher than he thought. He had threatened someone who operated on a level so far above his own that he couldn't even see it until now. The fear he felt wasn't of her. It was of his own staggering ignorance. He had called a precision instrument a toy, and now he was lying on the ground, broken, while the instrument stood over him, silently showing him exactly what it was built to do. The final day of Riggins's week was different. There was no run at dawn, no obstacle course. He was told to report to the small, plain office inside Building G14. He stood there, clean now, but feeling permanently marked on the inside. As Senior Chief looked him over, the older man's eyes weren't unkind. They were just deeply knowing. "Sit down, Sergeant," he said. Riggins sat, his back straight, but not with the old arrogance. It was the posture of someone waiting for a verdict. "A week ago," Senior Chief began, leaning back in his squeaky chair, "you saw a small woman at a ketchup stand. You saw someone you thought you could push. You saw a target for your bad day. What do you see now?" Riggins didn't answer right away. He looked down at his own hands, which were scraped and bruised from ropes and concrete. "I see an operator, Senior Chief, a professional. Is that all?" He swallowed. The memory of the gun barrel on his neck was cold and vivid. "I see someone who could have ended me in that mess hall if she'd chosen to. Someone who showed me more mercy than I deserved by just walking away." Senior Chief nodded slowly. "Good. The first lesson was humility. The second lesson is respect. Not the yes, sir kind. The real kind. The kind you give to someone who has earned it with their skill and their discipline, not just their rank." He leaned forward. "You threatened an officer whose job it is to get close to the worst people in the world, gather what she needs, and get out without a sound. Your insult wasn't to her as a woman, Sergeant. It was to her as a warrior. You disrespected the craft. And in our world, the craft is what keeps you and your teammates alive." He slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. It was Riggins's completion certificate for the corrective training. It had no details, just a date and a line for a signature from the unit commander. "You're done here," Senior Chief said. "You'll return to your unit. The court-martial is off the table. There will be a formal letter in your file. That's the cost of your education. Consider it cheap." Riggins took the paper. It felt light, but it carried the weight of the entire week. "Thank you, Senior Chief. Don't thank me. Your attitude is your own problem to fix. The Marine Corps invested in you. I suggest you start giving them a better return." As Riggins turned to leave, he paused at the door. "Senior Chief, is the lieutenant here?" I'd like to speak to her." Senior Chief just gestured with his chin toward the back of the building. "She's on the South Range. You have 5 minutes before you need to be gone." Riggins walked across the gravel yard to a simple open-air shooting range. He heard the sharp, precise cracks of gunfire before he saw her. She was alone, wearing protective earmuffs, standing at a booth. She was firing a pistol at a target 25 meters away. He watched from a distance, not wanting to interrupt. He saw her fire 2 rounds, pause, and look through a small spotting scope. Her face was calm, focused. She adjusted something on the pistol, almost imperceptibly, and fired 2 more rounds. The rhythm was methodical, perfect. There was no wasted motion, no excitement. It was work. Skilled, deliberate work. She must have sensed him, because she finished the magazine, set the pistol down on the bench, and turned, pulling off her earmuffs. Her hair was tied back tight. She looked at him, waiting. Riggins walked up, stopping a respectful distance away. He came to full, formal attention, something he hadn't done for her in the mess hall. He looked straight ahead, not at her face. "Lieutenant Vance," he said, his voice tight but clear. "I request permission to speak, ma'am." "Granted," she said, her tone neutral. He took a breath, still standing rigidly. "Ma'am, I am here to offer my apology. Not for the fitness report, or for having a bad day. I am apologizing for laying hands on a fellow service member, for using threatening language, for disrespecting your capability and your profession. I was ignorant, and I was wrong. I understand that now." He finally brought his eyes to meet hers. They were still that cool gray, but he thought he saw a flicker of something not forgiveness, maybe, but assessment. She studied him for a moment, then gave a single slight nod. "Apology accepted, Sergeant. It wasn't warm. It wasn't friendly. It was an acknowledgement, an administrative clearance of a debt. It was what he needed, and all he would get. Thank you, ma'am." He broke his attention, the formal moment passing. He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Sergeant." He turned back. She had picked up her empty magazine and was calmly reloading it from a box of rounds. "That letter in your file," she said, not looking up from her task. "It's a piece of paper. Your Marines won't see it. They'll see you. What you learned here. Use it. Lead them better." Then she turned back to her booth, slid the magazine into the pistol, and chambered around. The conversation was over. **** months later, Sergeant Riggins was on perimeter duty near the airfield. The old hot anger was gone. He was quieter now. He listened more. He thought about efficiency, about control. He'd even started running his squad through movement drills he'd painfully learned, not to be cruel, but to make them better, to make them think. He heard the distinctive thumping roar before he saw it a special operations helicopter, low and fast. It banked over the field and settled onto a distant, isolated pad in a cloud of dust as the rotors began to slow. He saw a team jog out from a nearby building towards it. They were dressed in unmarked gear, carrying heavy packs and long weapons cases. They moved as a single unit, a machine of few parts. And there, near the front of the group, was Lieutenant Vance. She was just a figure at that distance. But he knew the way she moved, effortless, purposeful, a part of the whole. One of the team members said something, and she turned her head to answer. For a second, her gaze swept across the airfield, across the distance, and passed over where he stood on the perimeter. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just stood a little straighter. He thought she might have given the slightest, almost invisible nod in his direction. Or maybe it was just a shift of her helmet as she turned to board the helicopter. He would never know for sure. It didn't matter. The helicopter's engines whined back up to a scream, and it lifted off the ground, climbing fast and banking away toward the horizon until it was just a speck, then gone. Riggins turned back to his duty. The sky was empty again, but the lesson remained, solid and permanent as the ground beneath his feet. He had learned the weight of respect, and he would carry it with him from that day forward.